Thank you very much for your patience. I know that we are running late, but we're still waiting for the two panel speakers joining us. But because of the time limitation, let's just get started. So good afternoon, everyone. Let me just introduce myself. My name is Keisuke. I'm a senior climate change specialist at the World Bank based in Dhaka office. I just joined the country office 3 months ago. So I would say that I'm still new. I'm still learning about a lot of stuff in Bangladesh. So look forward to having these conversations more from going forward. So today's session is about carbon pricing and carbon markets. And then this morning you have heard a lot that there's a lot of financing gap. And then how do we actually fill the financing gaps? One of the potential areas of avenues could be carbon pricing and carbon markets. We know that. But what's happening in Bangladesh and what's happening globally, this is where that we like to discuss further and deep dive a little bit with you during this session. So today, I would like to start with my brief introductions about latest trends at the global level in terms of carbon pricing and carbon markets. Afterward, unfortunately, our distinguished guest from the Department of Environment, he won't be able to make it, but we have a line of the experts who can actually fill in and then share the lessons learned and some of the thought that based on our guiding question that we would like to discuss today. So with that, let me start with my presentation, and then we'll get started. Thank you. Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. Okay, I hope you can see my presentations, and there's also one distinguished panelists who are joining online, so hopefully that she can also see my presentation. So today, I would like to start with a few, areas as an introduction. First of all, I would like to start with what's going on globally on carbon pricing more in general. And then zoom in a little bit about carbon markets, and then lessons learned and how we can actually go forward. So with these presentations, I would like to share what we understand on the carbon pricings. The fundamental question is why we want to put the price on carbon. Obviously that we like to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in a cost-effective manner. By putting the price on carbon, we can give a signal that where that we would like to promote low carbon technology and practices by promoting those activities on the ground. By putting the price on carbon, so there's a certain scope that we may be able to generate the revenues from the carbon pricing instruments. So how do we make best use of the revenues? That's where that we would like to scale up, and we would like to cover some of the potential emission reduction activities where that it's not happening without any help. So that's what we want to actually put the price on carbon. Those mitigation activities is not only contributing to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, most of the time that they have development benefits, like co-benefits. Maybe some of the mitigation activities can actually help reduce the air pollution, or some of the mitigation activities can actually create more jobs and the productivity as well. So we're expecting that by putting a price on carbon, there are a lot of multilateral benefits by doing so. So lastly, for why we are doing this price on carbon, because internationally, there are so many things happening. And some countries, they put a carbon tax, as you might have heard. Some of the countries also implementing emission trading scheme, a different carbon pricing instrument. But it's not just happening only within their own jurisdiction. And this morning, they're also talking about that some of the countries, they put so-called carbon border adjustment mechanisms. What it means for other countries where that they don't have any domestic carbon pricing instrument, are they just to ignore them? That's not the case, right? Because you're exporting some of the products to those countries and those areas, they want to actually put the price on carbon. So that means that exports that you are producing to those countries, there's also kind of impact that whether that they are able to manage the emissions from those products. So that's why we matters, why we want to take care of the carbon pricing. So when we talk about carbon pricing, I also want to just to give a, our understanding. When we talk about carbon pricing, sometimes you can think of carbon taxes, emission trading schemes, or carbon markets. These are schemes where that we directly address emissions of greenhouse gases because that we would like to reduce those emissions. Then we talk about that this is the direct carbon pricing. But then there are a couple of other policy and measures where that they also contributing to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, even though those schemes or policy and measures are not primarily addressing or targeting emissions of the greenhouse gases. But then there is indirect impact by lowering greenhouse gas emissions by doing so, which is something like fuel exercise and PAT differentiated fuel cells, where that they don't really necessarily kind of address emissions of the greenhouse gases, but eventually those also contributing to the reduced greenhouse gas emissions. So when we talk about carbon pricing, it's good to just keep that in mind that there's a different type of schemes and instrument, and then how those instruments are going to work, it's really depending on your objectives and circumstances like country or regional context, and then how you're going to make functions within that country context. So globally for the carbon market, carbon pricing is more in particular. This is I know the graph, it's a little small, so you may not be able to recognize which countries are which, but then just to give you the overall picture that globally there are already more than 80 jurisdictions where that they have already implemented carbon pricing. When I say carbon pricing, it's more about direct carbon pricings, mainly for carbon tax or emission trading scheme. So these are the countries where they have already implemented, and like EU, probably you might know, but then there are also emerging economies where that they also planning to implement such carbon pricing instrument, either carbon taxes or emission trading schemes like Brazil, or in the South Asia, neighboring countries like India or Pakistan. So by those carbon pricing instruments already happening globally, whether that how much we are actually covering the emissions of the greenhouse gases globally, by those more than 80 carbon pricing instruments, so far we are already able to cover up to 28% of the global GHG emissions by those carbon pricing instruments. So this is a graph that shows what type of carbon instruments are already implemented. The dark blue are emission trading systems, and the red one is the carbon taxes. As you can see, maybe you may not be able to see that much, but in 2021, there's a huge jump in terms of the coverage of the GHG emissions by those carbon pricing. Was it because of the implementations of the Chinese national emission trading scheme? You know that China is the now largest GHG emitters, but then at the same time, they're also really advancing their own policy and measures in order to address their own emissions, including implementations of the national emission trading scheme. So this is the reason why that you see a lot of increase of the coverage of the GHG emissions. And then in terms of what type of sectors are already covered by those carbon pricing instruments, this is what you can see from the light bar chart, mainly for the power sectors, but at the same time that there are also increase in the industry sectors, partly because of, again, that expansion of the Chinese national ETS. So they are now covering not only power, but then also industrial sectors under that national ETS schemes. You may have the question that, okay, it's good that there are coverage by those instruments. What about some other sectors like agriculture or forestry sectors? But then, again, we need to think about whether that particular carbon pricing instrument can be effective to address such emissions by different sectors. So most of the time for those carbon pricing instruments like emission trading scheme or carbon taxes, these may not be the desirable or technically feasible instrument to cover those emissions in those sectors. But then how those countries are trying to cover those emissions in other sectors, it's kind of combination of the different policy and measures. So for example, then in addition to emission trading scheme in the power sector, maybe they want to address emissions from agricultural sectors. But then agricultural sector may not be suitable to implement carbon pricing instrument like emission trading scheme. If that's the case, whether that they are able to promote mitigation activities in agricultural sectors, yes, could be. Maybe some other mechanism like carbon credit. Maybe carbon credit could be more suitable to address those emissions and then link with the demands coming from the compliance market, like carbon price, like emission trading scheme. So if someone in the obliged entities under the carbon tax or emission trading scheme, if they are not able to achieve their own target, maybe some of the countries can actually give some flexibilities that they are able to make use of the carbon credit in order to achieve their own kind of compliance. So that's how the countries are trying to actually address the different type of source of emissions by different schemes to make sure that it can be effective and very cost efficient. So it's good that there's a lot of happening for the carbon pricing, carbon taxes, and emission trading system, because this is a kind of we are trying to put the price on carbon. I think the price does matter, right? If the price is really cheap, it cannot really help to actually achieve overall commitments to limit the temperature increase by up to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So there are certain expectations that the overall projections of the carbon pricing, what would be the best way for us to achieve overall objectives by 2050. So right now, we are expecting that by the carbon pricing, we need to have the price between 65 to 127, that range. If this is lower, if the price is lower, then there is also difficulties that we are able to make a proper price to achieve our net zero goals by 2050. So So this is a graph in terms of the price range by those different instruments already under implementations. As you can see, only sizable carbon pricing instruments are currently at the range where that we think that we are on the track in terms of the price that is needed to achieve overall global commitments. So now I would like to focus on a little bit on carbon markets. So now I talk about little kind of emission trading systems and carbon tax. And what about carbon markets? So you can see that carbon market, this is the market based on the demand or supply of the carbon credit. It's very simple, right? Because if the demand is higher and the supply is less, then price goes up. If the demand is less and the supply is high, then price goes down. That's very simple, but when it comes to the carbon market, it's very complicated. You can hear a lot from our distinguished panelists later on, but then just to summarize, what makes very complex and complicated when it comes to the carbon market, because we have a different source of the demand. For the demand to the carbon credit, sometimes this comes from domestically. So for the countries where that they have already implemented or under implementations of particular carbon pricing instrument, like ETS, carbon taxes, but sometimes they will also give a flexibility, make use of the carbon credit as to offset, as to make their own make the obliged entities compliance. So then sometimes that carbon credit demand may come from those obliged entities under domestic carbon pricing instruments. Then there are also possible kind of demands coming from international kind of communities where like the Paris Agreement, so the countries have their own nationally determined contribution. And some of the countries have exclusively mentioned about the use of the carbon credit as to achieve their own commitments, for example. Then if that's the case, parties will be potential buyers as a source of demand for the carbon credit. And then there are also at the individual level, some corporate entrepreneurs, some other entities who may have their own commitment, who have their own social responsibilities. In order to achieve their own commitments, they think that they can demonstrate such compliance by credit. So this is also another source of demand. So what's happening in the carbon market more in general globally? So this is another the country map, so the global map where that you can see which countries are already implementing their own domestic crediting market, and which countries are already considering about setting up their own domestic crediting market. So the green one is the countries where they have already set up their own crediting market, and the light green ones are the countries where that they are planning to set up their own domestic crediting mechanisms. So some of the countries, as I mentioned, they're putting this domestic scheme because of the complementarity to achieve their own overall the target for the greenhouse gas emissions. Like some of the countries, they will just set up this domestic crediting mechanism for particular sectors like agriculture or forestry sectors that they want to promote mitigation activities in those sectors because those sectors are not covered under the existing carbon pricing scheme. So they're trying to make sure that they have more coverage so that they are able to achieve their own country commitment and so on. So briefly mention that internationally, as you know that the Paris Agreement, we have market mechanisms under the Article 6. Probably you might have heard that. I'm not going to go in detail, but then just to highlight that under the current Paris Agreement, in terms of market mechanisms called under the Article 6, two distinguished different mechanisms. One is more about bilateral cooperation agreement. So some countries may want to agree with some countries and then deal on transfer of emission reductions by only for those two countries, which is under the Article 6.2. Then the other mechanism is under 6.4. This is more like UN mechanisms. As you might have heard that under the previous Kyoto protocols, we used to have clean development mechanisms where that developed countries are looking for the carbon credit from the developing countries in order for their own commitments and the compliance under the Kyoto protocols. Similarly, for this Article 6.4, it's governed by UN, but then in terms of the potential buyers and potential suppliers of such emission reduction under that schemes may be different compared to what you have seen in the Kyoto Protocol, because essentially that all the parties under the Paris Agreement, they have their own commitment, they have their own target in terms of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So how to deal with transferring of the carbon credit emission reductions from your own countries to other countries, you have to take into account whether that how you actually deal with your own commitment achievement or under the NDC. So slightly different in terms, the mechanism itself is quite similar, but then strategy approach to make best use of those schemes may be different because of the circumstances by the parties are totally different. So this is another graph that I would like to show you. I'm not going into details in the for how this kind of the graph is showing, but just to show that this is a kind of a ongoing emerging trends on the bilateral agreement between particular parties under the Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement. So I know that you may not be able to see that much, but the left-hand side is a kind of in the countries where that they initiating the bilateral agreement, like Norway, Singapore, South Korea, Switzerland, and the Kuwait on that graph, but they are already starting make a bilateral agreement in order to deal with the particular strategies in order to make use of the emission reductions in between those countries. Because this is a flexible mechanisms, and then in terms of the what type of mitigation activities or what type of methodology, what type of procedure they are going to take is absolutely up to the bilateral parties, not the UN mechanisms per se. So that's also another area that if the countries start working with bilateral parties, how they are going to set up their own systems to deal with, and then some other countries are dealing with, may be different. So under Article 6.2, there will be a lot of differences. Maybe there are common areas, but then fundamentally that this is a totally different from UN-led mechanisms. So a few more slides I would like to end my presentations. So what are the kind of credits coming from? So this is the graph showing that over the last 4 years, in terms of supply of the carbon credit, you can see that slightly declining of the supply of the carbon credit. Maybe you may understand that why it is happening. A bit of the complexities of the country environment that also kind of gives difficulty that countries are making border actions, border commitment, that also affects on the potential source of the demand as we discussed. But then in this graph, left-hand side is in terms of supply of the carbon credit, the by chart, and the right-hand side is a retirement of the carbon credit. What it means that retirement, meaning that those credits being already issued, but then utilized for such purposes. Sometimes the buyers may already declare that in order to achieve their own commitment, then kind of declare the retirement. So then those carbon credits are not available in the market. But then cumulatively such carbon credits are not retired, meaning that available credits are cumulatively increasing. So then going back to our, the question, we have enough credit? Do we have enough source demand? This is also this is a kind of one of the trends that we have seen so far, declining of the carbon credit, supply of carbon credits, but then accumulating the credit available in the market. So what about the price on the carbon credit in the market so far? Again, so I only have like a 2 years consecutive trends to 2023 and 2024 on this slide. But then you can see that overall credit price may not be something that you were expecting. And the credit price are also different by different sectors. Again, that potential buyers from the source of demand, they may have certain preferences in terms of the credit, where these credits are coming from. Eventually that they are looking for some quality of the credit, but at the same time, they also want to demonstrate their own compliance by demonstrating the different type of carbon credit. So some buyers may prefer more nature-based, removals, or some like household targeted type of mitigation activities in terms of the carbon credit, but then some of them may not. But then overall, when it comes to deal between buyers and suppliers, usually that price may be higher by bilateral agreement, meaning that over-the-counter tradings, so that they will deal those carbon credit purchase by between particular buyers and particular supplier. So a bit of the flexibilities in terms of conditions, and then conditions and kind of eligibilities of such like agreement would makes little possible to have little higher carbon credit price. But in comparisons, if it goes to from the exchange market, then the price may be slightly lower compared with the bilateral kind of agreement for so far. So that's what we see. And then compared with the potential emission reduction credit from renewable energy, and then credit from the forestry, you see the huge difference in terms of current credit price. Can you guess why? One of the reasons is that for the carbon pricing, we want to help the mitigation activities where that may not be happening without any price on carbon. That means that if the mitigation activities are not technically or economically feasible, but then it's important to realize because of the huge potential of emission reduction, that's where that we would like to actually promote through the carbon pricing instrument. That means that this actually can show that some of the renewable energy activities, there's a lot of activity happening without any help of the carbon pricing. Because that maybe, for example, like a solar panel, in terms of the price of the solar panel, it's getting more economically feasible. That means that maybe they may not need any help with the carbon pricing. That's where that some of the perceptions coming from the potential buyers. That also, gives the differentiations in terms of the price. Because of the source of demand, they may have their own preferences to look at the carbon pricing, the carbon credit. So this is my last presentations, and then we would like to start with interaction with our panelists. Again, as you can see, that's very complex. Carbon markets, carbon pricings. It's not that like something that you can actually get if you're interested. There are certain kind of preparations are needed, and then there are also certain type of capacity building technical assistance, and then institutional setup, infrastructure need to be set up. So I would like to end my presentation and then open up and then have more conversations with our distinguished panelists. So thank you very much, and hopefully that this will give you a little kind of a good understanding and introductions for you to interact with our experts from the panel today. Okay. One more. So today, I have one more. Can you also put another screen again? So from now, we have 1 hour at least, and to discuss and then hear from our distinguished experts. We have already put a couple of questions that we would like to hear from them and have some discussion with you. So let me just to quickly go over what type of question I have already asked our friends and the panelists. And although that they don't have to necessarily to cover all the questions, but we hope that it's a kind of guiding questions to frame some of the interventions by the panelists today. So first question is, so what are the practical steps Bangladesh can take if they want to pilot carbon pricing instruments, such as a carbon tax or emission trading schemes or domestic crediting mechanisms? Considering Bangladesh's institutional capacity and the sectoral emissions profile, which instruments offer the most feasible starting point, and what trade-offs should policymakers be aware of? So this is one set of the questions that I have asked my panelists to address if they can. And the second question is, how can Bangladesh practically integrate carbon pricing and market mechanisms into their nationally determined contribution implementation strategy? It may be already happening, as you know, but let's hear from the experts more. So what are the key institutional data and the infrastructure challenges, and how can they be addressed to unlock climate finance and meet mitigation targets? Given Bangladesh's limited domestic carbon infrastructure, how can it strategically engage in both voluntary and compliance carbon markets? In my presentation, I didn't really touch upon much the different type of markets under the carbon market, but then there's a bit of the differences in terms of the mechanisms. So that let's hear from the experts. So what are the practical implications of Article 6 bilateral agreement, which I mentioned about Article 6.2 emerging, and the corresponding adjustments? The new world, probably some of them, but then our experts can actually address that, how it works. So last question, which sectors or project type offer the highest potential for carbon credit generation and climate resilience in Bangladesh? How can these projects be designed to deliver measurable core benefits for vulnerable groups, and what safeguards or benefit sharing mechanisms should be in place? I know that questions are all over the place, but hope that some of the questions. So just to be sure that experts may choose which question you like to address. Don't necessarily to kind of go one by one. It's really up to you. But then I would like to also mention that in order for us to have enough time to interact with the participants here, could I request you to limit in 7 minutes, at least for the first intervention. And then if there's any follow-up, then we will invite you or participants to join the conversation. So with that, let me finish my presentation and then move on to Thank you. Okay, yeah, hopefully that makes a little sleepy. Okay, so thank you very much. So now that we would like to invite distinguished panelists, and before that, we would like to take one pictures, if you don't mind. It's okay? Okay, great. So, so the first speakers I would like to invite, Dr. Saqib bin Amin, the professor from Department of Economics, North-South University. Dr. Amin, can I go first from you?
Yes, obviously. Thank you very much for a nice presentation, and I'd also like to congratulate CPD for organizing such a nice event. So let me start. As an economist, I would always like to say any policy should come from a proper economic analysis. It's very important, like, rather than taking the policy, like, on an urgent basis, you should have done a proper economic study that will give you some sort of clear insights regarding the possible benefits of the, policy. So first of all, this question actually, I had this question back in 2020 or 21, and then I started thinking, how can we develop a model that can actually integrate environmental aspect in the economic model? Because what we have seen that, we are mainly focusing on the economic modeling, but environmental aspect is always missing in the econometric model. So I started developing a dynamic general equilibrium model, which is very, very instrumental. Any sort of general equilibrium model, whether it is dynamic stochastic or computational general equilibrium model, these are very instrumental in terms of proposing some sort of long-term policy recommendation. And during that time, I started digging out, what is the easiest way, what could be the starting point to adopt, carbon pricing in the macroeconomic model. And I found that, in Bangladesh, we had a major problem, and the problem was the market price distortions. The price that we have in the energy market is totally regulated by the Bangladesh Energy Regulatory Commission. So the free market environment is missing in the energy market. So there is a absence of cost reflective pricing. So given this context, if you cannot ensure the cost reflective pricing, you can never be able to actually adopt carbon pricing in this market framework. So my dynamic general equilibrium model found that without removing the existing price distortions, you would not get the maximum out of any sort of carbon pricing policies. So I simulated different scenarios, started with a very benchmark scenario, and with introducing carbon taxes ranging from $5 to $30. Then I have also tried to remove the existing price distortions both in the fossil fuel market, also in the electricity market. And what I have found, it was really interesting. My findings reveal that without removing the existing price distortions, you never be able to capitalize the introduction of carbon taxes in Bangladesh market. So, and I have found that when you remove the existing price distortions in the fossil fuel market, electricity market, then you adopt the carbon pricing mechanism, $5 you impose carbon taxes, $5, that will bring you very close to the Paris Agreement, 5% reduction. In my analysis, I found 4.7. So this is very, very instrumental. We need to get rid of the existing price distortion in the market before introducing the carbon pricing in Bangladesh market. Another very important aspect is that, we have also some barriers. If you look at the market, we have very limited human resources. We have lack of technical, institutional barriers. There are also some sort of limitations in terms of technical understanding. So it's very, very important you try to focus, you try to emphasize on the, infrastructure, institutional development. Do we have any actually comprehensive carbon market environment in Bangladesh? Do we have any carbon register in Bangladesh? Do we have any proper monitoring system? So without ensuring this sort of mechanism, you never think about getting a successful outcome from introducing the carbon pricing initiatives. Then we can also see that there is a lack of awareness in, among the project developers, among the financial analysts, also the academia, the young minds. We are not fully aware actually to what extent the carbon tax can be imposed in our country. Is it really required? So there should be a proper training arrangement. There should be a coordination among the different stakeholders through proper public-private collaboration. We can create a scenario, then we think about the long-term impacts of introducing carbon pricing mechanism in Bangladesh, because we also need to know the context of the country. So if I give you some stylized facts based on my literature review. So at this moment, Bangladesh does not levy any national carbon tax. We don't operate any sort of emission trading schemes, and there is no impose on fossil fuel taxes. The net carbon effective carbon rate is still zero, which implies that the emitters face no penalty for their emissions. So, and also that Bangladesh is actually low emission country in terms of global comparison. Globally, still we can see that actually per capita CO2 emissions is 4.67 tons. However, in Bangladesh it is around 0.66. So now we're still a low emitting country. So however, there is some way we can think about introducing carbon taxing in Bangladesh. Obviously, carbon pricing is more feasible option than the emission trading system if you would like to incorporate this in Bangladesh, because and I think the fossil fuel sector, since our if you look at the data of the 2024, around 114 million tons carbon is being emitted in 2024, and out of these 27.9% coming from the fossil fuel, then another 49.3 is coming from the natural gas, and remaining 21% is coming from the coal, since the coal usage has been increased for the last couple of years. So that's why I think carbon pricing mechanism could be introduced in the fossil fuel sector, and it also has some co-benefits, as we have seen in the initial presentation given by our expert. So it can generate co-benefits. If you this sort of taxes can revenue mobilize the domestic finance, and that can be utilized for the development of renewable energy sector. You can invest, you can utilize this money to further adopt the advanced technology in the renewable energy sector. So if you can actually introduce advanced technology in the renewable energy sector, that can actually give some sort of long-term benefits, because that can also deal with the CO2 emissions. So I think this is how we can actually think about introducing carbon pricing in Bangladesh market. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Doctor. Dr. Amin, so I think it's I just noticed great points in terms of the how that carbon pricing is going to work. But then I think it's also important to interact with the potential stakeholders, and I think most of the countries where that they have already implemented the carbon pricing instrument, they took a long kind of a process to make sure that the stakeholder who will be directly impacted or most indirectly impacted, they are part of the conversations going forward. So thank you very much for pointing out. So with that, let me move on to Mr. Tano. uh, Chakraborty. I hope my pronunciation is okay. So he's from the head of the Power and Energy and Environment Sustainability's meme group. So we would like to hear from him about your interventions. Please.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity, as well as I really like to thank CPD for inviting Hamim Group into this session. I will put some perspective into it of this today's discussion in the context of actual user from the point of view of users. There are two things we need to deal at while we are doing our business. What kind of emission we are looking into? Kind means it is in terms of mathematics, like whether I am looking towards absolute emission or I am looking towards relative emission. When we started our sustainability journey in 2014 or so, till 2022, relative emission, relative emission, taking targets on relative emission and everything, it was going very well. But eventually it turned into absolute emission. Now, absolute emission has its own problem. It's a very big problem because see, I produce ready-made garments. So ready-made garments, I produce I can say 90 lakhs or 1 crore garments per month. So if I look into that, my year-on-year relative emission has gone down, and those have gone down significantly. For those efforts, we have been appreciated not only in Bangladesh, we have been appreciated globally. But the moment it turns into absolute emission, Hamim or any company like us, Pran, DBL or Square, we are expanding. That's the. I mean, I can say we say that we are alive because we are expanding. So the moment we expand, our absolute emission goes up. So now to counter that, it is told that you can go ahead for purchasing the renewable energy certificates, or you go for renewable energy. Now, renewable energy has its own technological limitations, huge limitations. Renewable energy, especially solar, it is only 22% efficient, the best commercial available one in practical. And it is also available effectively for 4 hours, whereas I am a 24 hours factory. So just to give you an example, Hamim has already completed 12.2 megawatt rooftop solar power plant. And I can tell you for sure that I have two divisions. One is garments and washing division, and another is textile division. I have absolutely no rooftop available in any of the factory garments and washing factories, and it is 12.2, which counts for 13% of my electricity consumption. So it is now with a 22% efficient technology, with a 4-hour available technology compared to a 24 hours demand. So technology is limited. So now I need to look for other options. I need to look for the merchant power plants and others to compensate for my requirement. Now that's electricity. Now electricity is not the main consumer of energy. It's the boiler who consumes the most energy of, at Hamim Group boiler, it is called consumed at boiler. So if I consider that, then that 13% comes down to hardly 6.5% of the total emission. And I have no rooftop right now. So that's the gap. That's the big gap. Now we understand that the carbon trading is a solution for that, and if we are able to get in touch with that, then yes, we can touch our goal of net zero. We have taken a target of 2050, but of course we can do it much earlier. Now, problem with carbon credit is, first of all, the policy. One policy, first of all, there is no clear-cut policies in Bangladesh, which guides which will guide you. The most popular carbon trading certificates, or what we look for, is IREC. IREC has its own limitation, that it has to be bought within the country, it has to be sold within the country. So the prices are a big challenges over here. And if I go ahead with those, look into those challenges, these are big challenges, and I need to drain out a lot of money for that. So, but so this is the problem with the absolute emission. But my effort, I have a humongous effort put in. Let me tell you what is that effort. All my gas generators are with cogenerations. All my boilers are coming with condensate recovery economizer. These are cost involved in it. So because I have done this, that's why year on year, my relative emission has gone down. But because of the expansion, my absolute emission, so I have no credit in that reducing the relative emission potential. Apart from the energy savings and all these things I have, but in terms of carbon credit, these are not accounted for. So, so that's one thing. Second is baseline. Which year to do? Which year to take? Someone is taking 2018. Someone is taking 2021. Now my brands are coming and telling that, okay, forget about your 2018. It is done. Now take 2024 and start fresh. So these are the thing not answered yet. Then target year of mitigation. Earlier, I was given a target of 2040. Then it was 2035. Now it has come down to 2032. And absolutely no idea where the money is going to come from. Of course, we have our experts, lenders over here. ITCOL is here. We are doing our next project, 15 megawatt solar power plant, 16.9, 17 megawatt, with the help of ITCOL at the pre-finance interest rate of 5%, which is a good commendable rate. And we are going to commission by May or June 2026. So all put together, 27 we are going to do. So this carbon market, if there would have been a policy developed, there would have been a base price declared that, okay, this will be the base price in the market. So and the government will be controlling that. So because if you are leaving it to the market openly, like for example in India, I might be a bit wrong, but somewhere here that it was being sold at 40 cents per megawatt hour or per rake a couple of months back also. 40 cents. It doesn't, I mean, so cheap. But in Bangladesh, when I went to find out in last December, I was being charged that $5.5. So think of the difference, 40 cents, just 300 kilometers away from my factory site, and 5.5, more than $5 in Bangladesh. So that's where the embargo creates problem. 40 cents is payable, but $5 per megawatt hour is definitely not payable. So if the border is opened up, we are open. If we can negotiate openly, of course, this would be good for us. I think taking cue from your presentation. So there is a cap and trade option in the world. It's a good option where cap means that a particular GHG emission per year is assigned to you. Okay, you can go up to this much of emission every year. So if I'm doing something good and say for example 100 megaton I am allowed. So I do not reach 100 megaton, I reach 90 megaton. Then 10 megaton I can sell to somewhere else. It's a very good policy. But how do you know that I am releasing 100 megaton or more than 100 megaton? You know how the monitoring system is in Bangladesh. So today, releasing 200 megaton, it is possible for us to say that I have released 100 megaton or 90 megaton. So those MRVs are really required to be thought of, that what should be those instruments. There are successful examples from there we can do. There is a satellite monitoring which is possible nowadays. Then there are monitoring system, metering system with which this can be uploaded in the internet. So in our company, we have done this online monitoring system. Our meters are being monitored by our branch. So that we have already done. So those methodology can be applied in nowadays. Of course, AI involvement of AI would be required because in fact for our case when we wanted to merge everything and took to our head office, so there were a lot of complications. So finally, Siemens intervened and they found a solution for us. So so those things are available in the market, available with Hamim Group themselves also. So with these decisions, I think online monitoring, allowing AI to come into this, and then creating the baselines and deciding on the way the MRVs. So these things I guess would be really helpful. And with this, one thing I want to mention, that if we are developing this model successfully, this creates a publicity for Bangladesh. Then there is a trust level created. No, these guys, whatever they are saying, they're doing, they're proving. So then there is a huge risk perception by the donor agencies globally. Whenever they look into Bangladesh, they want to invest, they want to give loan, they say that no, there is a big risk. So automatically your interest rate goes high. So if we can implement these things successfully, then our image would be good. In fact, India was having similar kind of image as we are, but now India is no more over there. So there are a lot of investors who are willing to invest at a lesser return. They have the less risk perception, so automatically interest rate comes down. So these things are the need of the hour right now. I will end my speech with this, that Hamim alone, for its in the way to become net zero, it needs $175 million, among which Hamim has already found $32 million by its own pocket with the generous help of ITCOL, European Union, French Development Bank, German Development Bank. But we need much, much more than that. But whenever we are going for that, we find that risk perception is a big challenge for us. So those will be solved if we can make our entire system this kind of transparent. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chakobli. I think it's a great point that for the carbon credit mechanisms, I think the MRB is quite critical. That's where that we understand that the government is also trying to set up like a national framework, so that every different sectors have their own kind of a robust mechanisms to make sure that emission reductions or the source of the emissions are properly kind of tracked by the certain methodology and reporting system. So thank you very much for pointing out that very critical aspect of the carbon markets. Thank you very much. So I would like to move on. So based on my order, Mr. Shafiko Alam, lead energy analyst, Institute for Energy, Economics, and Financial Analysis. I would like to to give the floor to him. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, yeah, Domi, if I pronounced it properly. But yeah, apology that I had to moderate another session, so I could not actually go through your presentation. So pardon me if I actually repeat some of the things you have already mentioned. I would like to briefly touch upon all of the questions, all 4 questions. Before that, the first question is on the piloting. What are the preconditions for a piloting of a carbon pricing instrument, that is ETS or carbon tax? Before moving to that level of piloting, we need to first do an assessment. Which one is the right instrument for Bangladesh? Is it carbon tax or is it emissions trading scheme or a national carbon market? So why it is so? This is because we need to check the emission profile of different sectors. What are the carbon intensive sectors? Emission intensive sectors. We need to have a clear idea on that. If we look into the data of the Sustainable and Renewable Energy Development Authority, who in 2 phases announced 189, only 189 large energy consumers. If that is the case, and there is also a threshold of for some cases, 3,000 ton well equivalent. If that is the threshold, so then there won't be enough emission intensive units in Bangladesh for an ETS, that is a cap and trade, because the market needs to be very liquid for a cap and trade to happen. There should be enough supply and demand. If we look into the Brooklyn sector, somebody can give that example that Brooklyn also emits a lot, but with which entities they are going to trade? So that is the challenge. So that's why we need to have a clear needs assessment, which policy instrument is needed for our emission reduction goal. If we consider the net NDC3 that has just recently been formulated, so it has that conditional and unconditional part. So unconditional part, so the limited amount of emission that we need to reduce from different sectors, for that, do we really need a carbon pricing instrument? So that is the first question. And then the second question is, if we need, then which one is the right instrument? So for obvious reasons, given that the emission profile is so, it includes so many small emission entities like garments, even in textiles, you will not find too many industries that produce more than 3,000, 4,000 ton of CO2. Not too many industries. If that is the case, then ETS is a complex instrument. And then there is the case of administrative challenges. For emissions trading scheme, there are a lot of administrative challenges. Not only the MRV thing has broached, the speaker has already broached that MRV issue, how to monitor that. But MRV is at a later stage. How we are going to manage all those things, setting the baseline and then doing other things, creating the platform for trading, registry. So a lot of important aspects are there before the MRV. So based on my research also in the past in Germany in 2018 and 19, so my conclusion is emissions trading scheme is not the right instrument. Even if we consider the Indian case, who are now entering into a national carbon market very soon, based on their energy efficiency trading that they had earlier, PET scheme, perform, achieve, and trade. So they have so many emission entities and large emitting entities. And also, for example, the steel sector in India, they have coal consumption. We don't have that. So given all these things, I feel probably carbon tax is an option. Then again, we need to do all those exercise, how to devise that and how it will affect. Then another question is, are some of the major entities regulated? Yes, of course, regulated. For instance, power sector, they are regulated. If that is the case, will carbon price work? That will not work. So how to do that? So then you need to first remove that subsidy. Because if you impose the carbon tax on power sector, let's say coal-based power plant, what they will do at the end of the day or at the end of the month, at the end of the year, they will just submit the bill to the BPDB. So what is the point of having that carbon tax on coal? Unless the price is fully, it is market driven. So actual price, if they cannot recover, then there will be subsidy. Then there is no point, because subsidy and tax, just the opposite, two opposite things. So to balance it, first you need to have the real price. And then what else? So in that case, this piloting thing comes. So we may select small sector or a sector where we can start with a small pilot. For instance, brick kiln could be an option. So where we can check, a minimum amount per ton of CO2, or maybe per ton of coal, like India introduced probably a decade ago, or 8-9 years, decade ago, of course, more than a decade ago. Coal cess, initially they started with 50 Indian rupees per ton of coal. Then eventually they increased it up to 400 Indian rupees per ton. So it helped, this revenue helped in India to ramp up their clean energy capacity. So they recycled it. So utilized this revenue to expedite renewable energy capacity expansion. But there are a lot of issues. If you Google, you will find that a lot of transparency issues and many other things, fund diversion. So keeping that aside, if we can design a system where we can actually utilize this carbon revenue, and for what? So for that also we need to do an assessment. This carbon revenue, where we will use. And then, of course, before doing that, we also need to do a distributional impacts. If you increase the price of certain commodity within the sector, then what impacts that will have on other sectors or the poor people. So a lot of things we need to do even before going to pilot. So these are some fundamental things we need to do before not before designing, even before coming to the conclusion that carbon tax or ETS, that is the basic instrument. And now the question is, to what extent this will contribute to our energy and climate policy. It should be flanked, properly flanked with our broader energy and climate policies. Now the second part, okay, how can Bangladesh integrate this? Of course, we have, this is what I mentioned, that unconditional option. For that we can certainly consider, but given that our energy efficiency improvement in the last decade, that's what I was checking, in the last 1 or 2 months, we have done very well on energy efficiency front. So probably energy efficiency and the renewable energy capacity, government has already floated tender. And then there is rooftop solar program, ITCOL has projects. So with all those capacity, probably the unconditional part, that part probably will be easily able to achieve. So in that sense, does a national carbon market really matter? So that is the question. And for international market, of course, we have the opportunity to utilize both Article 6.2 and 6.4. Under 6.2, definitely the negotiation among the governments based on the projects that can happen, and that the private sector can play a major role under the UNFCCC regulated system under Article 6.4. So probably with the people, those who have experience in CDM, Clean Development Mechanism, the earlier version, they will have, they will be able to utilize that experience in this case also. But one important aspect is the Department of Environment has already designed Article 6 roadmap. Article 6 roadmap. So that roadmap will play important role, but we also need some inclusive stakeholder consultation so that people know that what is there in the roadmap. They are on the same page. And not only that, the Department of Environment and the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, they should conduct periodic capacity development program also for the private sector who can tap into this international carbon revenue through this Article 6.4. Which sectors? Then again, which sectors? So, of course, brick kiln is one of the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. That is one. Then we can also think about improved cook stove. That is it will certainly deliver co-benefits to the women, children, the household. So that is one thing. And in the future, given that we have in the absence of local gas exploration, we are currently going through severe gas crisis. We need to supplement that with the imported LNG. In that case, probably in the future, we also need to consider a transition from gas boiler to electric boiler, because electric boiler is highly efficient. Given the stock of a gas boiler we have, particularly the old ones, based on the discussion that I had with some stakeholders, so some of them operate at 70%, 80% efficiency. So electric boiler can reach up to 99% efficiency. So these are the few things, a few areas that we can certainly consider. And on the national level, of course, we have some projects under the CDM for gas transmission, distribution leakage improvement. So that can be further considered, because the amount of loss that is probably in the order of 50-60 billion cubic feet, which is roughly 20% of the LNG import currently. So that's a huge amount that will probably, that can also be under, if government consider, can be under 6.2, but currently the CDM project there, they will be transitioned to 6.4. So if that is the case, then that the private sector revenue earning opportunity will be there. So, I mean, there are opportunities, but it is not that we are so energy intensive, or our sectors are so energy intensive, that ETS will be the right instrument. A proper assessment will be needed. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lams. I think it's a great point that emission sources, like where that we would like to actually kind of address by different schemes, actually need a lot of kind of assessment, including not only for the price discovery, but at the same time distributional impacts, but that is going to be affected by those schemes. So thank you very much for pointing out. So just to let you know that we are running out of time, and we want to have enough time for you to kind of interact with panelists. So just to make sure that we will try to make sure that we limit in 5 to 7 minutes for each interventions, and I'll try to come back if there's need for the additional questions and discussions. So moving on, Mr. Shami Kamal, Assistant Professor from Bangladesh University of Profession. So I'd like to invite you to give your interventions. Thank you.
Thank you to the keynote speaker, first of all, for his wonderful presentation, which was quite detailed and comprehensive. And I would also like to thank Center for Policy Dialogue for inviting me as a panelist in this presentation. So the moderator has given me, I think, 7 minutes. I think I'll be focusing on 5 key broad ideas, and I hopefully will be able to finish it within 7 minutes. So as I've said, that I will be focusing on 5 broad perspectives that relates to Bangladesh's development. So first of all, we can see a global shift. We can see a global shift towards industrial policies. So, and this is happening all across the globe, in the global south as well as in the global north. So if I focus on the global south countries, that means the developing countries, as we say, we will see that the countries like Vietnam and China, these countries are using the green policy tools or the instruments that we are discussing here as a part of their broader industrial policy mechanism. So they are linking the green policy instrument with their industrial policies to enhance their industrial productivity, to enhance their labor productivity, and as well as creating environmental sustainability. So I think this link is very important for Bangladesh also, to create to establish this link between industrial productivity with the green policy tools. So when we are talking about this green instrument, we should remember that newer technology is also cleaner technology. So the industries will have some amount of incentive to adopt this green policy instrument. As well as we should remember that when we are talking about the policy tools like ETS, the carbon tax, we should evaluate them with the alternative policy tools that are available that may be better suited and better effective for the context of Bangladesh. So this is the first perspective that I wanted to put on the floor. So the second thing that I would like to mention relates with the institutional context and governance mechanism in Bangladesh. So we have spoken about ETS, we have spoken about carbon tax, but one thing that should be remembered that there will always be some amount of problem regarding these policies that relates to asymmetric information and moral hazard. Because the regulating agencies in the developing countries for these policies are the government, right? The government actually regulates these policy instruments and whether the carbon tax is being collected or the ETS mechanism, the infrastructure of it. But the firms will always have more information compared to the regulatory agencies. So the opportunities is always there for moral hazard and other unwanted behavior in terms of the firm, because the firms, they will have more technological capability, they will have more information, and they will have sophisticated people working on the carbon emission, how much carbon they have actually reduced or emission has actually reduced. They will have more information about it compared to the regulatory agency, which is usually the government. So this thing in the perspective of the governance mechanism has to be considered. And when the government agencies may increase the regulatory barriers to control the firms more, it may impose additional entry barriers on the small and the micro enterprises. So as our panelists already discussed, that these entry barriers may increase due to those things. So this is the second point that I wanted to mention regarding our context today. So the third thing is that I wanted to mention is about carbon credit, right? Carbon credit mechanism. And I think the keynote presenter has already discussed, but I think there are three, one thing that needs to be mentioned is that there's three mechanisms, like international credit mechanism, independent credit mechanism, and government credit mechanism. These are the three ways the carbon credit mechanism actually works. So far, we have only explored international credit mechanism via the CDM projects, and we know that around 41 projects were included in it, and we can further explore it via the Paris Agreement, Paris Agreement Article 6.4. But there is an opportunity, what I think is there's an opportunity of bilateral cooperation that is on the plate that we need to explore. And our keynote presentation, I think I want to thank him because in his first slide, as long as I am correct, in the first slide, he actually talked about this cooperation, this international cooperation. So I think the third mechanism, that means government credit mechanism, for example, Australia carbon credit scheme is going on, and we can have this bilateral partnership with countries like that. So the fourth point is about blue carbon credits. I think blue carbon relates with our marine and coastal areas ecosystem. So the blue carbon can be developed in the context of Bangladesh. We have the opportunity to largely produce blue carbon credits using Sundarbans forest. And so far we have focused on conservation and management in the Sundarbans, one of the largest mangrove forest in the world. But there is a possibility of focusing on afforestation and reforestation also. Because in the recent reports, we can see that the price premium, there is a price premium on the afforestation and the reforestation process. So if we focus on the afforestation and reforestation as in a larger way, along with the previous conservation and management process, we can have a larger price premium on that. So that is why we should equally focus on afforestation and deforestation when thinking about blue credits, if not more. So the final point is regarding some alternative policy measures. I think my previous panelists have mentioned a lot of them. I won't be repeating. So one policy that can be effective, quite effective in the context of Bangladesh, particularly in generating newer production houses who will produce the renewable energy or the solar panels is the feed-in tariff. The feed-in tariffs, these can actually secure some amount of price and profit that will be ensured for the newer producers, right? So this actually reduces the risk for the producers, the farms that may produce the solar panels or other renewable energy products. And the reduction of risk will help them to organize their production and think in long terms, in the longer terms. So these stable cost and benefit calculation can be helpful to them. And the same logic can be applied to brick and clean. And this is another sector that I would like to particularly mention is about the leather sector in Bangladesh. One thing, and this will be my last point, is focusing on the green technology transfer, right? So we have to remember that in Bangladesh, the garment sector actually emerged due to these technology transfer. There was a joint partnership between Desh and Diwau, which actually helped this adoption of newer technologies and skills. So we have to do that for the green technologies. There can be government-assisted joint partnership. Government can subsidize and provide all forms of support to those joint partnerships, where the foreign firms will collaborate with the local firms, and the local firms can actually learn how to use the green technologies and develop their human capital and the workforce. Because often, in various cases, we have seen that it is not the cost, rather the skills that actually are the main barriers for adoption of newer, greener technologies that not only increases production, but also is cleaner. So thank you for that, and that was my part of the presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Mr. Kamal. I think very clear 5 points that you would like to contribute to these sessions, and I also like to be reminded that carbon pricing policy should not be implemented standalone. I think has to be overall comprehensive policy, because eventually that some of the sectors may have a different policy already implemented. So we need to actually avoid any overlaps and then additional burdens for the particular sectors. And again, we haven't really talked about much, but blue carbon credit are also emerging, where that we still, there's a chance that we need to explore a little bit where it can be done in Bangladesh. So next speakers, Mr. Shams Zaman from PwC. I'd like to hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yadami-san. Thank you for that. Yeah. So I'll try to be brief. I think given the time frame that we have, and I think there are like 4 main areas that I think we are expected to cover today. And definitely, this is a new topic from the context of our country. And there are quite a few institutions or industries which have started looking into it. And everywhere there has to be a pull or incentive to do that. For instance, the ready-made garments industry have started looking at it because the importers or the brands and the countries in the brand's end, so they are making it increasingly imposing that this decarbonization has to happen. So that's how there is a bit of a pressure. So similarly, beyond RMG, going forward, the other exporting or importing countries, I mean, eventually we may actually expect more and more regulatory pressure from those countries' end. And once that happens, I mean, it may actually come very suddenly, but perhaps with a timeline, milestone. But I think it's actually better for all of us to look into this segment really and try to stay ahead of the curve. I think that's important. So I think the questions around what are the practical steps Bangladesh can take to pilot carbon pricing instruments, I think I just tried to take some preparation, of course. So I think the first stage of implementing carbon pricing is benchmarking and setting a standard for the carbon emission per unit of production for specific industries. So it will always be industry specific. So whoever is above the benchmark or utilizing more, I mean, should be penalized. and whoever is below should get the incentive. I think that will create the demand and supply and more of a market-driven carbon pricing. Another crucial step is the actual pricing of fuel. I think the previous speaker has just mentioned that we'll have to reduce the subsidy, and we'll have to allow the international competitive pricing, including carbon tax on more polluting industries. Let's say furnace oil, or let's say the natural or very popular brick fields. I think that will be very, very important and effective. We should take or initiate pilot projects in some of the industries which may be funded through domestic as well as local funding or international funding. And in the case of the solar panels in Bangladesh, I mean, it could absolutely lead that segment in terms of financing and making it more and more popular. So I think adopting decarbonization measures that will lead to even energy saving. And we have seen the pilot in the solar segment actually, that once we were ready, we had more and more international support that propelled the growth of that particular segment. I think that's important. And once the industries are aware of the decarbonization benefits, I think that could be an optimal time to really impose the carbon taxes. So what are the trade-offs as we see implementing or going through the process? So first of all, there will be increased cost of production due to introducing carbon pricing. But it will eventually actually average out as the industries gets adjusted to the decarbonization initiative. So at that point, everyone will try to stay within the budget or within the target level. So that's important. We'll have to take out, I think, the subsidies, and that has a huge political and economic risk. So we do need a very high-level leadership commitment, if we try to actually do anything in that regard. And as for energy in particular, Bangladesh is a big importer. Over 90% energy is imported. Compared to GDP, it's more like over maybe 5%, 6%. So it's a huge area, and so the energy price and the subsidy, sometime in other way keep the price affordable for the general mass, but eventually it catches up through inflation. So something to look at. We'll have to enforce the carbon monitoring, the incentives and penalties required for large-scale capacity development of the institutions as well as the manpower. So any new projects that are coming up, I think in addition to the environmental certificate that is required, I think some level of compliance or making them commit to comply in the decarbonization initiative, I think will be important. And from that regard, we all know that that decarbonization or this particular practice relating to climate is a very niche subject still in the context of Bangladesh. There are very brilliant experts in the country. Some of them are definitely sitting on both of my side. But at the same time, we need to create and build more and more manpower that may require, incorporate it into the curriculum of the academia, and plus more and more perhaps training sessions that can, make it more popular, or that can create reasonable level of awareness within the new graduates, within the entrepreneurs, and very large companies which has already taken the initiative such as Hamim. So I think this kind of initiative and popularization of the topic would really help. I think we need to adopt a decarbonization efforts vis-a-vis implementing carbon pricing, which will eventually contribute to the NDC targets, so nationally developed contribution targets. So as part of it is the standardization of emission, standardization of fuel price, implementing those pilot projects that I talked about, and implementing carbon tax eventually would be relevant. I think there was a discussion also point about the Article 6 of the bilateral agreement. So it talks about the voluntary participation, which may be actually increased initially through introducing incentives for being compliant. So eventually there are two ways the pricing can be done. It can be market-driven, it may not be market-driven, but the decision is that eventually we'll go market-driven. So some of the companies, they are actually looking at, they are, carbon, sort of, they saved a lot of carbon. So they are looking at the ability to basically sell these credits in the international market. So that will have implication from the rules and regulation of foreign trade, or how to sell it. So it may involve some collaboration or discussion with the central bank even. So I think those are the entities that we need to also add into our ecosystem to have a more comprehensive discussion. The Article 6 also, helpful in introducing advanced technologies and implementing decarbonization projects and accommodating carbon credits. So once the market is ready and there are a few successful pilots, I think more international commitments should be arriving. So that's an area we'll have to achieve step by step. And but of course, there is always a first step, and we have taken that, and we should take it forward. So finally, which are the project sectors that has the high potential? So if you look at RMG, I think in the RMG segment, already they have taken the initiative. Some of the very large steel companies also, who have their own sustainability departments today. So most of the large companies which have a long-term commitment, and which can also take it as a project, because it also has a bit of a expense involved, right, until the return starts coming. So that investment is being done by large companies. So I believe these conglomerates are already have taken it into account. They have definitely manned their department accordingly, and we also work and advise quite a few of these large conglomerates in Bangladesh on sustainability, ESG, and decarbonization. So we have seen that a lot of them, in fact most of them I would say, whoever have taken initiative, are actually quite well aware, educated, and very brilliant team that they have. So the important is to get some momentum in the process, and perhaps a session like this is really important, Yadumi-san, and eventually if we can also get the regulators involved or get them moving a little faster perhaps, I think that will be very, very helpful. So I think most of the exporting companies will probably face the music first, and so that's an area we should really work on to even protect the overall export position and competitiveness of the country. Beyond that, I think there is a transportation, there is a power sector, there is other industrial sectors, so that will also possibly fall in place. And a couple of areas like clean cooking is easier to implement, but it doesn't have a big impact in the whole spectrum of thing. Areas like mangrove forestation will have a big impact, but it highly depends on the nature and it requires longer time to really implement. Solar irrigation has been practiced in the country since about 2010, so that's helpful. Although there are multiple success stories, however, the model has to be adjusted to the current way of working, so that will definitely need to be discussed. And the other note, on a different note, I think the industrial decarbonization practice is comparatively easier to implement, and the result in high potential, because these are organized entity, large entity. If Hamim is today committing, which they have, so that will have a reasonably good contribution. If you're the largest steel company of the country, BSRM commits to something which they have, so that will have a very visible impact in the process. So I think the industries are also financially, technically, institutionally more capable. As I mentioned, they can invest and take this cost for a while, and they can also adapt to new technologies, and they also can absorb policy changes, and they have the influence to discuss with the policy makers also to make it really fruitful and implementable. So I think I'll stop there, and I wish the session all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tamans, for the very practical suggestions and based on your experiences and expertise. And I really like to echo that I think importance to get stakeholders involved in this process. And although that we have so many experts already, working in this space in Bangladesh, but at the same time, expanding that communities and providing more trainings and capacity buildings, like development partners like us, or somebody from the other development partners also presented. So I think this is something that we need to actually kind of pursue and then take into account for the further implementations here. Thank you again. So the next speaker, we would like to invite Ms. Aparna Sharma from the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. She's actually online. Hopefully that she's ready to intervene. Mr. Sharma, floor over to you. We cannot hear you. Can you just speak up?
Okay, am I audible now?
Yes, if you can speak a little louder, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Am I audible to you now?
Yep. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Yes. So a very good afternoon, everyone. I am Aparna Sharma, Program Lead from Council on Energy, Environment and Water. We are one of Asia's leading policy think tanks, and we're based in New Delhi. It is a pleasure to be here today at this important session on carbon pricing and carbon markets in Bangladesh. Firstly, I would like to extend my thanks to the Center for Policy Dialogue for convening this timely discussion, Mr. Keisuke Iadomi, Senior Climate Change Specialist, World Bank, and all my fellow panelists. As today we stand at a very critical junction discussing about carbon pricing. As part of my intervention, as I'm told, there are about 7 to 8 minutes at max. So I would like to quickly share India's carbon market journey and as it is developing this architecture, and what are some practical lessons or pathways for Bangladesh that it could consider as it moves towards its carbon pricing framework. So currently, as we know, India is rapidly advancing towards a structured and regulated carbon pricing ecosystem. As part of the broader climate of India, we have started with the market mechanism of the emission trading scheme, or more often known as the CCTS, the Carbon Credit Trading Scheme in India. This is a rate-based, intensity-based system. And in June 2023, the government of India notified this mechanism. This is a milestone and it laid the foundation for the Indian carbon market mechanism. So within the CCTS that we call the Carbon Credit Trading Scheme, we have the compliance mechanism and also a voluntary offset mechanism that was later included in December 2023 as part of the scheme. So this voluntary scheme allows for non-obligated entities to undertake emission reduction or removal projects and earn carbon credits. Just this year, we have 12 methodologies that have been approved under this system. And this covers renewable energy, green hydrogen, energy efficiency, landfill methane recovery, and mangrove restoration as part of some of the other projects. India's approach is rooted in flexibility. Our rate-based ETS focuses on emission intensity rather than absolute caps, and this allows for space for growth because India is an emerging economy while ensuring efficiency improvements. This model can be particularly relevant for emerging economies like Bangladesh, where industrial expansion and economic growth are priorities. In India, currently there are 9 hard-to-abate sectors such as steel, aluminium, cement, petrochemicals, so on and so forth, and around covering 900 plus obligated entities as part of our ETS cycle. We're currently in the first compliance cycle with the GHG emission intensity targets, which were just released a couple of weeks back. While not currently included, but there is also a provision to allow for offsets within the national ETS. So the VCA mechanism that the government of India has, it is planning to allow a certain percentage of the offsets as part of meeting the compliance target of the obligated entities under the CCTS. And this is again going to happen as the targets become more and more stringent. So these steps are moving India towards a dual track carbon market system comprising of both the compliance, ETS for energy intensive industries, and a voluntary crediting framework for wider participation. And these mechanisms together aim to lower the carbon intensity of India's economy and mobilizing private investment for low carbon projects. Now, quickly coming to our institutional anchoring and international linkages, India has also begun operationalizing Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement. A couple of speakers before me also highlighted the relevance of the Article 6 mechanism, the CDM approaches to bringing more finance into the emerging economies. And this is the approach that India is also undertaking. Currently, India has, as part of the bilateral cooperation, signed the India-Japan Joint Crediting Mechanism recently in August 2025, which is India's first formal Article 6.2 pact. This mechanism enables deployment of advanced low-carbon technologies such as green hydrogen, CCS, high-efficiency systems in India, among compressed biogas, while ensuring that resulting carbon credits are shared between both nations' embassies. Complementing this, India has also agreed with Singapore to establish a bilateral Article 6.2 cooperation framework as part of their comprehensive strategic partnership focusing on green trade, industrial parks, and carbon markets. So together, these agreements reflect India's current intent to leverage international finance, technology transfer, capacity building, while enhancing its climate ambition. Looking forward, the approach on Article 6 holds a wide promise for both the global south and the north. By formalizing rules through its national designated authority, India has identified currently 13 eligible projects under the Article 6 engagement, including both 6.2 and 6.4. These includes offshore wind, sustainable fuels, CCUS, green hydrogen, and among those that I have just mentioned before on JCM. However, operationalizing the Article 6 path for India requires a robust monitoring, reporting, and verification system for India as well to ensure that environmental integrity is there and prevent downside effects.
I think we lost her. Not sure if she's able to come back very quickly. If not, then maybe we will just ask her to come back again once she's connected. Okay, so while that we will, figure out how to get her back, but maybe just to note that experiences from India is also very interesting to hear, because essentially that they took into account very country context. So even though they are moving ahead to implement ETS systems, but then in terms of the approach is going to be intensity based, rather like absolute emissions target. So which is something that we already touched upon by panel experts. Then also very active for the international corporations, as recently signed with the bilateral agreement with Japan, with one of the kind of case that they are also working in a different approaches, not only for domestic but also international corporations. So while that we would like to hear from her a little more, then maybe let's just move on until that she comes back. So next panelist, Mr. Shaimo Bauman, one of the well-known carbon experts in Bangladesh. So let's just hear from him about experiences and what he can actually suggest going forward. Shaimo?
Thank you, Keisuke. Good afternoon, dear participants. First of all, I would like to thank CPD for invite, and also our moderator, Keisuke-san, for inviting me in this panel. And I see that, talking later, it has some advantage, because our distinguished panelist has actually covered a lot of things and left a little bit some questions for me. But I still find that I can talk about some of the things that has not yet been mentioned. So the first question, it was that which carbon pricing instrument is most suitable for Bangladesh, either carbon tax or domestic trading mechanism, or ETS. But the main focus for Bangladesh right at this moment is international carbon market. Because we need to understand that why a country should choose these which the carbon pricing instrument and in what combination. It is mostly driven by NDC commitment. And as you know, these carbon pricing instruments are a way of mobilizing finance. And it depends on what is the nationally determined contribution of the country. As you say, I think our moderator has shown the carbon pricing status of the 2025, and in 2025 there was 1.7 trillion US dollar climate finance mobilization in the mitigation sector, and I guess more than a billion, 1 trillion came from the carbon pricing and carbon tax, roughly about 700 or 850 billion US dollar from the international carbon credit mechanism, and roughly about $100 billion from the 76 ETS and carbon tax mechanism all over the world. So you can see that the transaction is huge in the international carbon market. And so as I have said before, that the country, which mechanism or the carbon pricing instrument country will choose is mostly dependent on the NDC and also composition of the greenhouse gas inventory of that. Like, you know that the national inventory has several sectors like energy, AFULU, waste, and IPPU. So in the Bangladesh NDC commitment, as you can see that there is two parts, unconditional and conditional. And unconditional part is like the commitment, the reduction commitment, Bangladesh will meet with the domestic source of finance. Both either could be public or private. But the conditional part, it means that the conditional part, commitment part will be met through international support. And in this international support, the majority of the support will come from the donor finance like World Bank, ADB, and bilateral but it will not be sufficient to actually cover or meet all the part of the conditional commitments. So usually how country choose a mechanism, and so international climate carbon market, the price is, if it is Article 6 aligned, the price is around 20 plus. And in the voluntary carbon market, the price is $1 to $5 at this moment. And the CORSIA price is even more, so like $30. So the priority of the Bangladesh is at this moment to be a seller country for high quality carbon credit because Bangladesh has a scope to sell its conditional commitments part carbon credits. And how this works, basically, Bangladesh must need to fulfill its unconditional commitment. But in the conditional commitment part, it is expected that under Article 6.2, a bilateral country like Sweden, Norway, Korea, Japan can provide adequate finance to Bangladesh to develop a project, and the outcome will be the carbon CO2 emission reduction can be shared between two countries. So this is the conditional commitment part is under the purview of the international carbon market. So whatever is in the Bangladesh is committed in the unconditional commitment part will become can be developed another not all of the technologies that is been mentioned in the NDC 3.0 are actually eligible for carbon market development. Because there is no methodology, or there is, for example, industrial energy efficiency other than brick. It's very difficult to bring those in the carbon market. Even you bring some of the projects, the price is $1. So because it is proving financial additionality is difficult. So what kind of project goes to international carbon market, and what kind of projects goes to domestic carbon market? Basically, projects with high marginal abatement cost, meaning higher technology cost, are usually bring in the positive list of Article 6.2 or Article 6 projects, and lower abatement cost that the country should prioritize to do the lower cost projects by its own fund or by its own mechanism. So also the domestic carbon market is also very important, because domestic carbon market allows the small scale projects and energy efficiency in other projects that cannot go to the international carbon market due to maybe methodology is not there, due to maybe not cost effective. And also it's a very low cost project, so government can actually bring it under the domestic scheme or domestic carbon market, and also implement this project and claim it in its commitment. So in short, the question was which one Bangladesh can start. Bangladesh has already started international carbon market development, and the roadmap is there. Carbon market framework is under development, and within a year, Bangladesh will also, and with this same infrastructure, Bangladesh can use to develop its domestic carbon, small solar irrigation pumps. There are many biogas pumps, but they cannot go to the international market. But if we into this system, and then some of the voluntary buyers or some other companies, and so domestic carbon market, we can do it within 2 years. It's not very difficult. Only we need to have the registry and MRV system in place. And carbon tax, we need to have a law. Like India already has a law, Vietnam already has a law, Indonesia already has a law. We don't have the law. So we need a lot of studies, as my colleagues panelists has been mentioned. But one thing they miss, that we need to find a way so that the tax burden is not actually transferred to the end users. So that needs to be taken care of. And and then carbon tax, we need to have a lot of studies. Then we have to actually establish a law. It will take 3 to 4 years. And ETS, Sofik has already said, I don't see any hope for ETS unless we discover some oil mine or iron mine or aluminum mine, and we have energy incentive industries. So I'll finish with the question number 4, because I guess it was not fully answered. And I do have the privilege to be associated with the NDC 3.0. And although it was roughly estimated, at present, Bangladesh has the most supply of carbon credit in the previous CDM phase was gas leakage. Reduction of gas leakage from the distribution pipeline of the natural gas. And it was roughly about 10 million. But still it has, according to the NDC 3.0, we have increased our ambition, so it can go up to 20 or 25 million if we can actually achieve our commitment. But it can be surpassed by the cook stove sector, because as this is goal, we have like 30 million cook stove for the rural households. And even you cannot claim all of it because you can claim up to the half of it, because when you cross the half, it becomes a baseline. So it's difficult to prove every additionality. But at least for 15 million, you are talking about 22.5 million tons of CO2 reduction per year. And we are also thinking about LPG and electric cook stove, so it could be more. So these are the two most promising sectors, and renewable energy, according to the NDC 3.0 commitment, it's around 8 to 10 million. And we have forestry commitment around 2.2. This is rough estimation, so because detailed methodology analysis was not done, but we also committed to alternate wet and drying system, which might also be more than roughly 2.2 or 3 million. And livestock, 5.5, because this NDC3, we have a huge commitment came in, ambitious commitment came in, livestock and alternate wet and drying of the Boro rice cultivation. So all together around 10 to 12 million from the Afulu sector. So I think these are the most promising sector, and there are many other sectors like blue carbon and other, but we only committed 100,000 hectare of land to do the afforestation, which roughly means maybe 1.5 million ton. So it depends on the NDC commitment as well. So I guess I have touched all the 4 questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaimas, for your very comprehensive answers, and then very strategic, and then touch upon the international carbon market. So as he likely pointed out, in terms of the approach, I think there is a possibility that trying to look at what will be the most effective way to make best of the international carbon market, which can be addressed by the different project types, project sectors. So I think this is quite important. Also, that what would be the best way for us to actually look at the like a small scale project which may not be so attractive to the international carbon market. So this is also another aspect that we can take into account. So Mr. Arumugir Moshed, CEO from Inaugural, thank you for being patient. So we like to invite him as a last speaker of this sessions, but then probably Ms. Sharma, if she's back, then maybe we can also give her back to finish her intervention as well. But before that, let me hand over to you, and then thanks for your interventions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kirsi. Thank you for inviting me. In fact, being the last speaker, that my entire talking points have gone haywire, because everything has been said, and I'm just wondering what to add. But what I can share is our experience as really being one of the market participants in the carbon credit, because ITCOL had previously also encashed its carbon credit from their portfolio. So what we have done is we finance some of these projects like improved cooking stove. We have financed solar home systems, and we have financed solar irrigation pumps. We're one of the major investors in the current industrial rooftops, and we have done solar mini grids. So all these kind of projects does qualify for the carbon credit. And we have, de-risked some of these certificates, and we have monetized. Now the experience that currently we're working with the World Bank under the CDF project, and we are very much involved with the formation or the preparation of the national framework under Article 6. What we see is, of course, this market is not very liquid. I think that's one big challenge. You cannot just, unlike a currency. For example, if you want to sell dollar against euro, you can just look, call some trader and you can just convert the currency in a free foreign exchange market. But in case of carbon, that's not the case. You have to find a buyer. And that takes time. Even if I consider for a moment that we have all the necessary ecosystem in place in Bangladesh with the framework and the legal framework and and it has a perfect ecosystem, even then it's not easy to find a buyer. And of course, the price is not easily available. And the prices vary from project to project. For example, the carbon credit that is generated from an improved cooking stove or clean cooking project versus, a carbon credit generated from a rooftop solar, would be different. And it doesn't have a market, like you get a quote of what is the price today of a solar rooftop carbon credit. You cannot just go out there and get that kind of pricing. This is a big global challenge, I think. So I was trying to understand the global market, and thank you on your presentation, you have said that. But saying that, I think Bangladesh has a huge opportunity because, as we always say, that we are rather a victim of climate change than a creator of this issue. And I think that internationally makes us, if we have the right national strategy, which I don't think we have as yet, that, if I look at Malaysia, for example, they have come up with a country strategy paper on carbon credit, what they want to achieve as a nation, as a policy. So if we could have one, this very comprehensive national document, which I don't think we have, it's not even a part of NDC, if I'm not wrong. So what are we talking about? How do we want to position Bangladesh in this carbon credit story? I think we need to have a national strategy. So if you look at Malaysia, they have a very clear strategy, how they want to take this forward. And I believe Bangladesh can really do the same. We could have a story, and we could go out internationally, and we could talk about some of the various projects that we could develop in Bangladesh. Project itself, please stop me if I pass my time. Yeah. So I think creating project itself can be a huge agenda. We are talking about some 4 million ICS. Think about how many more this kind of cooking stove we could have in Bangladesh. But we are running out of money. Nobody is willing to finance these cooking stoves anymore. ITCOL had a huge program now, we don't have the fund. The development partners simply wouldn't fund this kind of projects. But the garment sector could do it. Hamim and all these exporters could finance this, create a project, generate the carbon credit, sell it into the international market, bring back the money, and probably subsidize some of your loans. There are ways of structuring it. But we need to have that dialogue locally. So we are too dependent on external funding. It's not going to come. Let's be real. As we graduate to an LDC country, some of these development funds won't be there. ITCOL will not be there if we cannot find a more structured and more financial innovative products to do these things. So I think my point is, why don't we have one national strategy paper and really own it from the top and then, project ourselves in a very strong manner to the international community. Again, if you look at this, you see, we have encashed around 1.2 million tons of, and we have not celebrated it. Nobody knows that Bangladesh has done it. Even not in Bangladesh, nobody knows that ITCOL had done it. I was just following this VCM celebration by Saudi, and they have made it a national event. I think we need to brand ourselves, you need to communicate, and everything will fall in place. These are all technical. We have all the gurus out here to solve those problems. So I think that's my one thing I wanted to highlight. And, carbon credit, this cannot happen. If I see around the table, I don't see any traders here who are going to make this happen. Who are going to make this happen? These are all great in paper, but who is going to price it? Who is going to sell it? Where are those intermediaries in this discussion? So I request, World Bank or whoever is doing it, bring all the stakeholders around the table. We are talking about carbon tax, whether it's good or bad, I don't know. But the point is, where is NBR in that? So I think every time we do this kind of discussions, these are very fragmented. And we do face a lot of these challenges, and that slows down the process. So we need to sit around the table, Bangladesh Bank, NBR, transport, big sector, right? Forget about carbon credit. We are talking about electric buses in the public transport. And we're wondering how can we do this unless there's a political will to change the entire public transport system the way it runs. So please bring everybody together. So I think national agenda, all the stakeholders, practitioners, we are all important, and then it can happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think it's, you made it very clear that so importance of in making sure that, sorry, I just lost that point. Yeah, so the current market, it's a little, we need to find the little buyers, and then in order for us to make sure that there is a potential buyers, the country has to have very clear kind of policies or strategies so that this can be clear enough for potential buyers to understand what the Bangladesh really kind of looking for through the carbon markets. We are hoping that DOE, we unfortunately Mr. Shaukat Mirza was not able to attend this sessions, but we are hoping that he will kind of podcast. But hopefully that the next time when we organize a similar event, so we would like to hear more about what's been happening at the policy level. So I know that we are running out of time, but we promised that we will come back to Mr. Mr. Aparuna. Sorry, Ms. Sharma. She's hopefully that already back online. So we would like to give her one more time to finish her interventions before we can wrap up and then kind of interact with you before we close the sessions. Ms. Sharma, are you there?
Hear me? Yes, am I audible to you?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, so apologies, I actually quit from the event because of some issues there technically. Because of having better bandwidth, I'm going to currently put my video on off and jump to my key points on the pathways that can be explored by Bangladesh. As my initial intervention around India was focusing what India has done, I also wanted to bring out that just as India is at an inflection point, and we see Bangladesh too currently in that scenario, it is trying to balance its rapid development with climate ambition. And it is emerging as an economy with growing in energy and industrial sectors. And there are several lessons here, and it has been a fantastic session listening to everybody on their points, what can be possibly a way forward. And there are many to choose from, as the speakers have mentioned. My quick 4 points here from the discussion, and not repeating what everybody has said, but just to add to that discussion. First is that for Bangladesh to start with any hard policy carbon pricing measure, and which means that we are looking at a mandated system like an ETS system or a carbon tax. There would be a need to assess the industry's readiness. What is the institutional and governance capacity uh, to set up any kind of such mechanism? What would essentially work for an ETS's point of view in the case for Bangladesh could be starting with a pilot program. So, for example, this could be including only one sector in the system, as case of Indonesia and China, which when they started with the national ETSs, that was only included in the power sector. Or if it wants to include only one particular district or a city, it could also take a lot of example from the cases of the Chinese pilot ETSs. India has also had its pilot ETSs in some of its district, but those were from pollutant point of view. But pilot ETSs also work very well when we want to strengthen our policies going forward from a national perspective. So, in case power generation sectors or cement sectors, brick manufacturing, these are considered by Bangladesh to be integrated within the hard policy measures of carbon pricing. What would be relevant would include assessing the various complementary policies that exist within these sectors. What could be the possible distributional challenges, financial transfers between sectors when we are talking about ETSs? What are the policy possible equity concerns of a cost pass through to the consumers, because that eventually happens in case of an ETS. And then building on the existing energy efficiency programs, or if there are renewable energy targets that could provide a natural entry point. Further, the argument for having a carbon tax or an ETS for Bangladesh is relevant, because we have the CBAM like measures where a lot many countries are also currently coming out with border carbon adjustment mechanism. Specifically for the case of CBAM, as we see in 2026, this will enter the definitive phase. And while not currently included as a sector, but textile is possibly expected to be included as part of the CBAM policy. So in that perspective, keeping the view of CBAM BCA mechanism, formalizing explicit carbon price would then be essential for Bangladesh, even if this means in the form of, say, just having a carbon tax, because then you are evaluating the effective carbon price that is paid in your country. And the logic to having carbon price paid in the country of origin is that revenue from the generation of the carbon price could then be used or recycled to the industry back for a technology, building more technology towards decarbonization. Secondly, integrating carbon pricing into Bangladesh's NDC implementation strategy. And the speaker right before me also emphasized the essence of having a national strategy and how to build on these carbon pricing mechanism. Again, this requires strong institutional coordination. Data systems have to be robust, and setting up way in advance the MRV infrastructure that is needing. So going forward, what would be needed will be defining the clear baselines for these industries, developing the methodologies, establishing carbon registries. Again, institutions like World Bank, ADB, and policy think tanks can support or provide technical or capacity building support there. Third, even as domestic capacity develops for Bangladesh, it can look at strategically participating in voluntary mechanisms, and especially Article 6 markets. And Article 6 currently, as part of the UNFCCC, it has established itself as a high integrity market with projects specifically for Bangladesh could include in solar irrigation, clean cooking, mangrove restoration, and so on and so forth. And besides that, also Bangladesh has a strong potential for conventional removal projects, which includes afforestation, reforestation, agricultural projects, and also biochar as an engineered removal. So removals are significantly emerging engineered options for integrating into the climate ambition. So they can also be then looked at from Bangladesh's point of view. And finally, from this designing of these carbon pricing mechanism, what would be pertinent, and that which we see also in the context of India, is that the design has to embed benefit sharing and has to include safeguard mechanisms, which will be essential to ensuring that the local communities benefit equally, whether it is in the form of voluntary carbon market, carbon credit sharing between community farmers, or in the essence that we see that the cost pass through is equitable and is in no way affecting the affordability of certain important industry or power in the case of the electricity is impacted. So those are my quick points there. And thank you again to the moderator for having let me still put in my interventions there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Shalmans. Great lessons learned from India, and some of the steps that you already summarized. It's quite critical for the Bangladesh to take into account. First of all, about assessment and readiness for the sectors where that the Bangladesh may be able to actually tap on through the carbon pricing instrument. And then using pilot before going to the full implementation. This is exactly that other countries are kind of moving towards the full implementation of ETS or carbon tax on the ground. So thank you very much for your interventions. And I must apologize that, as you know, that we are already running over the time, and so there are also the sessions. It's going to start from the 5 p.m. So if you don't mind, then we would like to end these sessions, but then if you have any questions or discussion that you would like to kind of do with distinguished panelists, can I just suggest that maybe you take some time during the breakout before the next session is going to start. So with that, let me thank CPDs for setting up this very interesting and lively sessions for the carbon price and carbon market. And I also like to thank each panelist to bring your very extensive experiences and the suggestions and making this conversations very rich and fruitful. Thank you again for all the participants to join these conversations. Thank you.